The number one reason that properties sit on the market is price. It's not because there's some major thing wrong with it that people keep discovering in the inspection. It's usually not that.
Prices are higher than what they used to be, and interest rates higher too. So what I've seen recently, two ways that are working really well. One is going in, getting a good price on a property that's distressed, essentially using the Airbnb method, but then really decking out on the amenities.
Let's hang out with the kids, because that's the whole reason we ever started investing in real estate to begin with, was so we didn't have to work in 9-to-5 jobs where I'd have to ask permission to hang out with my kids.
What's going on, STR Nation? This is your host, Emanuele Pani, here with the man himself, Mr. Mike Reddy. What's going on, Reddy?
And I'm having an awesome day. And we just had an awesome guest, Avery Carl, on the podcast today.
Yeah, man. I think this is number 3 or 4. I think we should start doing like SNL and start sending people jackets once they get to a certain amount of shows. I would love that, or at least something of that sort, you know? Man, Avery is one of those people that is always a wealth of information. She's a super seasoned investor, both in the short-term space and in the long-term space. Dude really just has a good head on her shoulder. Both her and Luke, right? Like really good seasoned investors, and they don't sell the hype, right? They're not people that are like, give us 2 years and you can make millions of dollars. Like, they're very good level-headed, right? So a couple of great points that she kind of touched on that I loved. Number one was the concept of supply and demand over time. So what does that mean? As the market changes, seasonality changes, maybe something that didn't work before can work now, and vice versa, right? The other big thing, which is something that we stress about a lot in terms of knowing your numbers, is understanding the true cost of over amenitizing, over designing a house. 240, 235 episodes in, I don't think anybody had ever talked about that, right? And understanding from that perspective as an agent, what does that mean when you're really listing? And as an investor, if that is what you are feeling called to do, what are some things that you should be thinking about for yourself?
Yeah, 100%. I think Avery did a really good job of like calling out things that not a lot of people do. Like she mentioned she was, had some contrarian points, you hear on Instagram, or you hear on different podcasts too. Everybody's like cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. Well, she's like, well, you got to look at the long-term investment of the real estate, right? And where the location of the home is, not just how much it's going to make this year, but how much is it going to make over a year? And are you going to hold it for 5 years, 10 years, 30 years? And just, she had a very good viewpoint. And I think it's a testament to her being in the game a long time as well. Like there's, sometimes you hear folks like, this was kind of my viewpoint, not of her, but of, people that were in the tech sales industry for a long time, or the tech industry for a long time. They would always tell me, you would always know, like, hey, I've been doing this for a long time. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, well, that kind of means you're a dinosaur, right? But in her case, it's like, I've been doing this a long time, and I have a wealth of knowledge that I want to share with you guys. And I have some different viewpoints that not everybody has. And I thought she did a really good job of explaining what those viewpoints were to people who are not only, brand new investors, but people who have been in the game a long time. And just her testament of consistency, I think was the biggest nugget that I pulled away. And I think it's very common talking to high performers that is their biggest theme, is just consistency and keep investing and keep getting after it.
Yeah, man, she was great. And I was, again, always a pleasure to have her on, always a pleasure to talk to her. And she actually talks about a lot of really cool things. And also we get towards the end of it, we get into life, parenting, couples, how to work together with your spouse. And again, those for me are always
Goals,
yeah, they're always interesting conversation, because again, you guys know what our community is about, you know what we are about, and we do this for the family and for the freedom of being there for the kids that we have, the kids we don't have yet in my case, but that's why we're doing it, right? And so inspiring conversation, super awesome. She also launched a new book that she talks to us about on the show. And so without further ado, we welcome Avery Carl to the show. Avery, good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Last time we were here with your better half, the only man that gives me a run for my money when it comes to the hair, right? When both me and Luke have our hair down, it's quite a show, you know? What what you guys been up to?
Just living life, just trucking right along. You know, it's still investing, but you know, the rates are tough. So bought less real estate the last year or two than we did the prior years because it's harder to find deals now, but just being persistent, just running the short-term shop and hanging out with the kids, you know, trying to step out a little bit of the day-to-day and just hang with the kids. Cause that's, you know, why we kicked and screamed and fought so hard to get here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those people that don't know, Avery runs the short-term shop and has done quite a bit of things in the industry. What has been the most interesting thing that you have done on the short-term shop side for the last year? Because I think that was the last time you and I spoke.
Most interesting in the last year. Well, I think really like the most interesting thing is kind of watching the real estate cycle unfold. So it's been, I don't know, a lot of people may not know this, but the real estate market in 2023 and 2024 was actually worse than in the 2008 crisis. So more homes were bought in the 2008 crisis than in the last 2 years. So a lot of people don't realize that the real estate market like is in a big crash. I think everybody was waiting for a big crash to come with a pricing crash, which it did not. But so just kind of watching things unfold and watching people like I found the experienced investors who are very persistent are finding some really good deals because, you know, newer people are like, I'm not going to buy right now. I'm going to wait for rates to come down or wait for whatever. You know, they're always waiting for something. And the experienced investors are really getting some good deals because there's not any buyer competition right now, myself included. I've got a counter I'm about to send right now. So
that's awesome. So what do you think makes the difference there? It's just their understanding of different ways to slice the cake, or what is, you know, if somebody's new listening, they're in that boat, right? Like I haven't been able to buy, or I've been thinking about it, right? What are some of the things that you've seen with your more seasoned investor, and you and Luke, right? Like you and Luke are quite seasoned and quite smart, know some of the better minds also in the game, right? So your inner circle, it's quite advanced. So what are some of the things that you guys are seeing in terms of how you're writing your offers, or analyzing deals, right? That's been helping you guys.
Yeah. So I think where a lot of new investors get stuck right now is just they swipe left on properties because like, oh, the numbers don't work, and they're looking at the asking price. Well, properties are sitting on the market expiring like 6 to 12 month listing agreement periods. They're expiring. People are going through 2 and 3 real estate agents having their properties listed for, you know, a year and a half. And you can, instead of looking at those asking prices, figure out there is a number at which that property will work for you. Offer that number, because the thing about especially vacation markets right now is that the people who are selling, they are not happy to be selling. These are not people that are like, oh, you know, I've got $2 million in equity and I'm ready to sell at the height of things. The people who are selling right now, knowing how bad the real estate market is, are more need to sellers. And by just offering what number works for you, not really paying as much attention to that asking price, you're going to get told to buzz off a number of times, but eventually you're going to find that seller who's been on market for a year and a half, who's had 10 low offers already. And here you come with number 11, and they're ready to finally just let it go and be done with it. So it really does just take, I think maybe new investors get a little bit discouraged by purchase prices, which are just a suggestion at this point in the market cycle. If you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have said something completely different. And then also the persistence that it takes, because you might have to make 10 offers and go through 10 sellers who think that their property is worth what it was in 2021, or what their neighbor got, some crazy number that their neighbor got in 2021 because they had 250 offers. Eventually you will get to that person who's tired and who's ready to just dump it. And it's just a matter of getting to that seller, or finding that right seller who is willing to take that lower offer. And I think a lot of sellers are real stuck on, you asked me about real estate, so I'm just going. A lot of sellers real stuck on those high prices. And when you make a low offer, they think, oh, that's a low ball offer. But if you get 2, or if you're a seller and you get 2, 3, 4, 5 of these quote low ball offers, you start to realize that those are not low balls. That's market value. If if you got a property listed for 800 and you get 4 or 5 offers over 6 months in the 650 range, it's probably about what your property is worth. That's the market telling you something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And that's some great advice. I'm also curious because similar to you, right? I agent, broker, vacation rentals, right?
Right.
So what is something that you guys are telling to your agent? Because also, like, if it's a tough time for sellers, it's a tough time for agents as well, right? So what is something that you're telling your agents on like how to be successful in undoubtedly probably the hardest time to sell property and get paid commission over the last, I would say 10 to 12 years, right?
Yeah. So when it comes to our listings, I tell our agents, don't buy the listing. And what I mean by that is don't tell the seller higher than what it will probably sell for just because that's what they want to hear. Because what happens is if sellers are interviewing agents and one agent, let's say you've got a property that'll probably sell around 700 and one agent tells you, yeah, it'll sell around 700. And the other agent tells you, oh, comps say, I think we could probably get like 850. And normally it's like because you've given some indication of like how much you think it's worth. And the agent who just says the higher price, regardless of where they know it will sell for, we call that buying the listing. And what happens when people do that is it sits on the market. You don't sell it. The listing agent that bought the listing does not sell it. Then the seller fires that agent and then moves on to another agent and allows them to lower the price and the second agent sells it. So I tell my agents in this market, you always want to be that second listing agent because a lot of times sellers need to be told by the market. We don't want to believe that our property is worth less than what we think it is, myself included. Nobody does. So we always say you want to be the second listing agent. So it's okay if the seller is not going to be realistic about where it will probably sell. Let that agent over there who's going to tell them $150,000 more, let them have it because it's going to expire. And then when they lower the price, when they've got 6 months or a year of their listing agreement of the market telling them your property's not selling at the price that you have it, typically on the second agent, they will listen a little bit better. They've had a little bit more experience with the market and will lower that price. So I tell my agents, don't buy the listing. It's okay to be the second listing agent. It's not like 2 years ago when you could just tell somebody their $500,000 property would sell for $2 million and it would because there's 1,000 people bidding it up to that. So, patience. And then sellers, I would say, like, if you've got a property on the market that is just sitting and you do have a good agent who does specialize in short-term rentals, who a listing agent to me is only as valuable as their Rolodex. So if you're just slapping it up on Zillow, like on the MLS, that's anybody can do that. My Chihuahua can do that. But if they truly have done everything and they've called the other agents in the market and said, hey, I've got this great property. We've done deals before together. Check this out. Seller's negotiable, done all the things and it's not selling. It's not that your agent isn't listing it hard enough. It's that it's the price. The number one reason that properties sit on the market is price. It's not because there's some major thing wrong with it that people keep discovering in the inspection. It's usually not that. It's almost always price. And even those properties that have something terrible wrong with them, there's still a price at which those will sell. So it's always the price.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And I'll ask one more question, then let Riley speak. One of the big things that I get asked on calls all the time, because should I invested? And that's such a leading question to me because it's always funny. I'm like, oh, what market do you like, right? Like, what are you looking for, right? But you operate quite widely throughout the nation and you've done quite a bit. Anything your little black ball is telling you in terms of like future markets or market that like maybe you guys are looking at or you're finding kind of like interest or at least an increase in requests from people that are clients of the short-term shop and like, hey, Avery, like, do we have somebody here?
Mm-hmm. So for me, I do think that as time goes on and metro markets that are not dependent on tourism, where a lot of people live, whose income does not depend on tourism, depends on other industries, as those types of markets kind of limit and even outright ban short-term rentals, I do think that vacation town real estate will be a little bit more commodified because it might end up that the vacation type markets are really not the only ones, because not every metro market in America is going to completely ban short-term rentals, but they tend to be I think they'll tend to be the ones where you can do it most easily. And they already are the ones where you can do it most easily. I do think that they're going to continue to be kind of commodified. And you know what we've seen, I read a really cool article, I think it was on AirDNA recently, about the previously saturated markets. Like they used Joshua Tree as an example. So Joshua Tree had a lot of demand, and then it had a lot of supply, and then it had too much supply. And supply increased year over year from 2020 to 2021, like 20% in Joshua Tree. And then it got saturated, and then people had like a hard time getting things rented there. And then as the years have passed, year over year, I think last year, the increase in supply was only like 4%. So the tide kind of went out on the oversupply thing. And AirDNA was talking about how it was on all the best places to invest lists 5 years ago. And then it was very firmly off those lists in the past few years. And now it's back because the tide went out on the oversupply thing, but the demand is still there. So I found that to be really interesting, because there's a lot of markets like that across the country where we did see a ton of oversupply during 2021 because everybody could buy real estate at 2% interest rates. You know, I think my Chihuahua picked up a couple properties during that time. So I'm always going to I will die on the hill of vacation markets. I know that there are plenty of people who are successful in not vacation markets, but for me, if I'm owning a tourism property, a vacation rental, a hospitality property, I want to be fishing in the pond of 10 million visitors, not fishing in the pond of 10,000 visitors. So for me and my comfort level and what works for my brain, that's what real estate investing is. There's 1,000 ways to be successful, and doing what works for you may not work for other people, but you can be successful 1,000 different ways. So for me, it's vacation markets till I die for short-term rentals. For long-term rentals, I do a completely different thing, but for short terms, vacation markets.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm just looking at all the different markets. Vacation rental markets are doing very well, and I've seen it happen in my markets that I'm in North Carolina. Just regulations are happening everywhere, and also prices are higher than what they used to be, and interest rates higher too. So, what I've seen recently is two ways that are working really well. One is going in, getting a good price on a property that's distressed, and essentially using the Airbnb method, but then really decking out on the amenities. So I wanted to see if you're seeing that as well in your vacation rental markets, and like how that trend is. Because some of my markets, like Asheville, that's doing really well, but then at the beach, they're still a little bit behind. They're not as decked out on amenities. So I'm curious in your markets what you're seeing as well.
So I'm going to have a contrarian opinion on this to what most people say. Well, not partially contrarian and partially the same. So when you do the like hyper themed, hyper amenitized thing where you've got a backyard full of a pool and a pickleball court and putt, and you've got this crazy themed inside with like the custom beds. So that is 100% going to increase your income. There is no question about that. Now, where I see people get in trouble, because I don't see just the income. I see people when they come to us to list, or when they're buying, and I see what they're spending on the property to purchase it, and then what they're spending on these amenities. And it makes me nervous, because we'll see people who are buying a $500,000 property spending another $250,000 in cash on all these amenities that actually they don't add value to the real estate. They do add income. You will make money, but when you go to sell, you're probably not going to make that $250,000 back, because an appraiser, because they are still appraises residential properties and not commercial, an appraiser might give you an extra $10,000 for the amenities that you spent $250,000 on. But since the income does not affect what the appraisal value is, it makes me very nervous. So for me, I'd rather spend that $250,000. I mean, you can go buy another $1 million property for that. And we have seen, so we had a situation down here in Destin last year where we had one of those hyper amenitized properties, and I was like, oh man, this is going to sell so fast. The rental history is ridiculous, because the amenities work in terms of generating income. But what happened was, we went to sell it. We got a lot of showings, tons of showings. Nobody offered on it for an entire year. And every time we asked for feedback, we would say, hey, you know, what's keeping you from making an offer? What's keeping the buyer from making an offer? And every time they said, at this price point, we want a luxury feel. And it had, you know, a lot of murals on the walls, like palm trees everywhere. And they were like, this feels childish. And if we're buying a beach house at this price point, we want it to feel luxury. And they didn't want to have to paint over murals and things. So it's something you have to think about. If you're going to do the hyper amenitization, you have to be sure you're going to hold that thing for over 10 years to let that appreciation catch up. Because if you sell sooner than that, and maybe even if you sell after that, but if you sell sooner than that, you're just not going to get usually the amount of cash you put in on amenities back. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying don't amenitize, but I think you do have to find a happy medium of how much you're spending versus the opportunity cost of, could I go buy an entire other piece of real estate with this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. That's something that not a lot of people talk about, is just the amount of cash that you have to put into it. And I'm also curious too, as you're looking at different amenities to put in there, do you guys have any rule of thumbs? I mean, I know it's so difficult with the way appraisers look at each property in each market, but, you know, for instance, adding a pool or adding a bathroom or adding, you know, more square footage, stuff like that. Are there any rules of thumb that you go about that you know, kind of educate your clients on as far as adding some of those things?
I'm not a big fan of rules of thumb because real estate is just so subjective to the deal that's in front of you. But my advice is always to buy in the best location, buy an ugly property that has the right aesthetic. Like, you know, you're not buying a brick ranch house in the Smoky Mountains. So it needs to be a cabin, but has the room to add value to update. So maybe it's got an ugly kitchen with like green countertops, or, you know, maybe down here in the Emerald Coast, there's the big white tiles on the floor with the black grout that is very like 2005, and you know, the old 90s like blonde cabinets, things like that. You can absolutely buy, you buy a Gulf front condo in a great building that has really updated units that you can see on AirDNA, or I like to use Price Labs data, are doing really, really well. Go buy the ugliest unit in that building and fix it up so that you're not paying the same price that you would pay for the fully rehabbed unit, and it's in the same place. So my advice is ugly property, but make sure, caveat, that it's the right aesthetic in the best location, and don't get caught up in buying a really nice property that's too far away to try and make that the destination. Because in most cases, in vacation markets, people aren't coming to the destination where the attractions are, like the beach, to then stay 30 minutes away because to try and make your property the attraction. Don't try to make your property compete with the attractions. Put your property next to the attractions and buy the ugly property that needs the work, add that little bit of value, and then you're in the right location.
Great advice.
Super great advice. Okay, so I would like to switch us up a little bit. So one of the last time you came on the show, you're actually one of the first ones that wrote a book on short-term rentals. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, you can see one of the books on one side, and then there is a new book that looks a little bit different on the other side. Yep. Tell us a little bit about the difference between the two, what inspired you to write another book, and why should people get it?
Yeah. So the first book, Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth, wrote that in beginning of 2021, came out the end of 2021. And it's more of a primer. Like, why would you buy a short-term rental instead of a long-term rental? What kind of financing? How do you finance? How do you choose a market? What types of markets are there? Just the very, very basic. And Bigger Pockets actually approached me to put that one out. So I obliged. And then the second one, kind of same scenario, Bigger Pockets Publishing again. But I wrote both of them just based on things that our clients asked us over and over. So, okay, we had several hundred clients this year, and every single person asked this question. Well, that should probably go in a book, because if this many people asked us this question, everybody probably has that question. So the second book, Smarter Short-Term Rentals, is more of how to optimize the business side of your short-term rental business. So, we talk a lot about SOPs, systems and processes, hiring VAs, how to scale, systematizing things. And actually, Luke did write a good percentage of this one, but he would not let me put his name on it. So I just have to verbally give him the accolades, because he is the systems guy in our family and in our business. Like, so much so that it can be annoying. He tries to systematize me sometimes. Like, stop trying to systematize me. I'm a person. So he's definitely the systems and processes and all that guy. So, but I write a lot about the real estate market and deal finding and deal structuring and things like that in there too. So it's a little bit more advanced. It's for people who may be new, or they may already own properties that just want to outhost their competition, and how to do that.
That sounds great. I am very surprised that Luke tries to do that. I would be worried for my own safety, but I guess he's still around, so he must know. And that's probably why he continues to run. We were talking about off air how much Luke likes to run, and I think it's so that he can be still quick on his feet. Amazing. So now looking into the rest of the year, what is Avery excited about? What is Avery working on?
So I'm working on just hanging out. Like, we did all the things. We fought really hard to build a big business, and we've done that, and we've hit the goals of, okay, let's hang out with the kids, because that's the whole reason we've ever started investing in real estate to begin with, was so we didn't have to work in 9-to-5 jobs where I'd have to ask permission to hang out with my kids. So we've done that. We've gotten there. We're still, we're about to get under contract, I think, on our 10th short-term rental. Still buying apartment buildings and single family long-terms too. What else is next? And just hanging out. Like, we moved to the beach 5 years ago now. So just doing the things that we started all of this in order to be able to do. And I'm also
I talk about this a lot.
Oh, go ahead.
I want to talk about that, because Ian and I talk about this a lot. Mike and I do too. Is just like getting on the same page with your significant other or partner on goals, and just like, hey, we want to have X amount of rentals, or we want to have Y amount of income every single month. What would you tell people who are maybe in that spot at the beginning, but even maybe some of the advanced investors too that have some properties already? How do you guys do it?
It really is a marathon and not a sprint. So I think, there's a lot of stuff on the internet about how I quit my job on 2 properties, and I did too. I did that, but I was making $37,000 a year, which everybody else is making more money than that. And people thinking that it needs to happen overnight, or okay, they do it for 2 or 3 years and then it didn't work. It is a very get rich slow process, investing in real estate. And so my advice is just to don't stop. Just don't stop doing it. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other and keeping going. The difference between success and failure is just who kept going longer. And eventually, maybe you got a dog property on your first property, but maybe you got a dog on your 10th. Eventually, if you own enough real estate for long enough, you will have an underperformer. And if you find that earlier in your career, that's not a failure. That's a learning experience. So you didn't fail, you learned, and you take that into the next one. So I think just quitting too early is the biggest mistake that I see people make. And if you just find that way to keep going, then that's success.
I've had a couple of dog properties too. In 4 years, I bought one property once that didn't have any water. The well ran dry literally day 2.
Oh.
And so we had to dig like an extra 600 feet. We ended up selling that property anyways. But is there anything that you and Luke do, like any goal setting, retreats or exercise, anything you guys do to connect and just get on the same page on goals?
So for us, we have both the luxury and maybe the not luxury of working together in the family business. So it's kind of like it's not like I'm over here working on this and he's over here working on this and we need to come together about what's going on. Like, we're both in it all day, probably a little too much. And so at the beginning of every year, we'll have a little sit down meeting of what our goals for the year are. But I mean, we're so on top of each other every day working that there's really not, like, there's no having to come together. It's just kind of a constant. So we always are both involved in, what's going on, and, oh, this looks like this thing over here needs to pivot. But, he's on the same page with me too. Like, we don't have to do everything to death anymore. We can chill. And the goal is now to, he's coaching our son's t-ball. I coach their soccer. They're both in every possible thing. They're in theater and piano and tennis and like all the things. So it's just about helping them find their success. I mean, they're only 4 and 6 now, so there's not a lot of success to find, but just, raising confident, happy kids, that's the goal now.
One thing that you guys focus on as parents to build confident and happy kids, because I think that's a big component, right? That if I can think forward to having a kid, that's the biggest thing that I want for him or her, right? It's like, how do I help them be as comfortable in their own skin and in who they are and their vision for life, and to really like never lose that dream, childlike imagination that they have, right? Like 4 and 6, they're not even physically here half of the time. Like my little nephew is 2. I don't think he lives in the real world 90% of the time.
Right.
He's just everywhere, right? So how do you guys kind of cultivate that? And you guys have had such an amazing life as well. So like, how do you balance that?
So, I mean, there's a good chance I'm doing everything 100% wrong. So ask me again in 25 years. But here's what we try to do with the best intentions, right? The road to hell is paved with those. So we try to give our kids as many experiences as possible. So we go to a lot of music. Like my son is probably the only 4-year-old who's seen Judas Priest twice in his life. They've seen the Rolling Stones. They've seen AC/DC. We go to Disney World several times a year because we, live just a few hours away. We take them to New York. So I want them to have experiences of the world, and well, not necessarily the world, just the US at the moment. We'll get them passports here in a little bit, but just to go out and see a lot of things and do a lot of things and decide who they want to be, and not feel, because we live in a really small town. So I don't want them to have that, oh, I got to break out of this small town, and then when I get out, I'm going to go nuts, because that's kind of what I did when I went to college. So just giving them the experiences to see there's all kinds of people in the world, all kinds of paths you can take, and also teaching them like it doesn't have to be. So my husband and I are both ex-musicians, and the way it was always presented just to anybody, not necessarily by our parents, but up until now, or up until at least my mindset change, was, okay, you can go down the path of trying to do the thing that you love, which was music for us, or you can go get a 9-to-5 job. You can't do both those things. And you could, but showing them that there are ways to make money without having to choose between making money and doing the things that you love, I think is important. So showing them, for us, that's been real estate investing. So being able to show them, maybe it's not real estate investing for them, maybe it's something else, but that there are ways to do that without having to feel like, okay, I've got to give up everything that I ever wanted to do because I have to go get a big girl job. So to answer your question, I don't know. We just tried to.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great answer. Yeah, I love that answer. And again, I'll let Riley speak because Riley has kids, so this is probably more relevant to him. But since I've been hanging out with my girlfriend as a little 8-year-old, almost 9, and so for me, right, watching him human, like seeing him human over time, over this last 6 months, had been super fascinating. And so I take a lot of the growth that I have done over the years, and also the understanding of a lot of the things that I had to become aware of in order to change. And so I see it with him and I see it with her, and I'm like, it's very fun for me also, because I can only suggest, right? But I'm like, hey, this is interesting, right? From the perspective of like the personal development and the therapy and the work that I've done on myself over time.
Mm-hmm.
How do I help this little human a little bit easier, right? He's still going to have his little moments. Again, I think the human condition has up and downs. It's just part of what gives growth. But how do we help our little human better than we did at their age? Because you're like, hey, like hot hurts. I know because I experienced it. I'm going to tell you, so hopefully you don't do it, right? So that kind of similar concept to it.
I mean, I also try to tell I don't ever want mine to be scared to tell me something. So again, my mom disagrees with me about this. She was like, why are you doing that? Don't tell him that. That's just gonna make him act up. But like I tell mine, if you tell me the truth, if you come to me and say, Mom, I made a mistake, then you will not be in trouble. Like, I don't want them to be scared of telling me the truth. I want them to come to me for help so I can help them through their problems, and not when they have a problem be like, oh my God, don't let mom know. So I try to let them know, like, they can tell me anything and keep the lines of communication open. Again, even though they're like little kids. So like my daughter forgot to read her, or I forgot to make her read her accelerated reader book the other day. And it's only a 5-question test. And so she didn't do well but she didn't want to tell me. And she was like, well, Mom, you said I'm not going to be in trouble if I tell you the truth. And I have something to tell you. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, I made a bad grade on my accelerated reader test. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's actually my fault. But we'll work harder next time. We're going to work harder next time, and we're not going to lose our book, and we're going to make sure we sit down. So my goal is for them to want to come to us for help, to help them through, not to do things for them, but to help them through, and that they're not scared to tell us because like they don't want us to be mad at them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Mine are 3 and 2. So like they're just, they're going through the crazy stages, and it's cool how they're learning and starting to develop into little humans, because the first like 2 years they're really not.
Yeah,
They just got to take care of them 24/7. But yeah, if you ever write a book about that, I'll read your book as well. But if you ever write about a book about parenting, let me know.
Oh, well, I don't know enough about it. I'm just doing the best I can here. So it's like, we might be ruining them, but we're doing our best.
Yeah, it's
Awesome. Well, Avery, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I always love sharing. Kenny, Carl, maybe you or Luke or the both of
Maybe
you
a little
together
bit
is
more,
extra
right?
special. Yeah, always. But don't tell him. But so for people that don't know you guys somehow, right? If somehow you've been in short-term rentals and you don't know who Avery Carl is in the short-term shop is and who Luke is, where can people learn more about you, follow you guys, work with you, all that good stuff? And where can they get the book?
Yeah, so you can get the book Amazon, Audible. You can walk into Barnes and Noble and pick it up. That's kind of cool. And you can find out more about, if you want to be a short-term shop real estate client, we've got offices in 20 markets. We're going to teach you everything you need to know about managing it. You can go to theshorttermshop.com. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at the short term shop. Or if you want to follow like what I do day to day as an entrepreneur and mom trying to make it through, I'm at the Avery Carl.
Awesome. And you guys have answered this question a couple of times, but we're still going to ask it. What is your number one secret to success with short-term rentals?
Oh, with short term rentals, just keeping going. Like I said, just keeping going, not selling. I've never sold a short-term rental. I've sold an apartment building. Like I said earlier, Mike, we had a dog or two that had to go that we lost money on. So even successful investors lose money at some point. It's okay. It doesn't mean you suck. It just means you learn. And I learned not to buy cheap properties just because they're cheap. So
Amen.
just keeping going. Just keeping going is really the secret. In my opinion, to any success is not stopping.
Riley, any last thoughts?
No, I think this was awesome. A lot of good nuggets and lessons on the market, and also just real estate in general. Let's just keep doing it. Keep doing it. Same thing parenting. Just like keep doing it. Let's keep doing it. So appreciate you, Avery.
Yeah, thank you so
Awesome,
much.
Avery. Always a pleasure. And guys, we hope this episode was useful to you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Ciao, guys.